on today's episode of the Law of Tech podcast.
This is what I'm currently thinking and contemplating on, because I find policymakers also to be in a very difficult situation. Imagine billions of pages of law, and we all want consistency and we all want order. We want the principles to match the rules, and we want the rules to match the principles. And then we also want the things to protect our rights and to be practical and enforceable. And we want many different things. So policymakers have a real challenge, especially when it comes to philosophizing, when it comes to moral principles and values, and put it in accordance to that. However, on the other hand, we are in a perfect stage, especially in the European Union, where because of the digital technologies and because of these pressures, we are basically we're rewriting the whole law. Whatever has been written, it's been rewritten for digital technologies. Like if you look at AI Act, if you look at DSA, DMA, GDPR, there's the digital rights coming out, like everything. All the thoughts that have been in the 60 years of European Union law, now it has been into the context of the digital technology. So it is a great chance to have it synchronized, to go back to ECHR and readapt it, to go back to use these insights that we gained from what is valuable in society, where we're going, what is the future vision of political liberalism, what is the future vision of European Union, and to kind of synchronize the very basis and foundations of the union. But yeah, it's very challenging.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Law of Tech podcast. This episode, we'll be talking about all things human dignity, and in particular, we'll be talking about the role of human dignity in governing artificial intelligence. For this, I'm joined by Lekso Zardiashvili, and Lekso is a researcher and PhD candidate at the ELO Center for Law and Digital Technologies at Leiden Law School, where he's researching the effectiveness of the concept of human dignity with regards to the governance of AI. The primary focus of his research is the extent to which the concept of human dignity can be used for regulating online manipulation. Lekso, welcome to the show. I'm super excited, like we just said, to have you on the show and chat a little bit more about your work.
Hi, Hadassah. I'm also very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think we've been trying to kind of organize this for a little while, and finally I have the opportunity to have you. So I'm excited to talk about this this topic, the topic of your research. Now, maybe before we actually get into the nitty-gritties of the role of human dignity in the context of AI governance, I think it's good to maybe set the stage a bit. Talking about the concept of human dignity in itself, because I think it's maybe for some people, at least for me, a somewhat vague concept, and especially within the legal context, perhaps. But we'll get to that in a minute. Maybe first, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about what the concept entails, what it stems from, and some of the developments that we've seen?
Yes, of course. So why I love to research human dignity is that it's one of the most hated concepts that there is in law, and there's myriads of ways to describe it or conceptualize it or argue for it. But that's what makes it interesting. But eventually, there are, let's say, at least two major ways that we can understand human dignity. One is philosophical, ethical way, and another one would be purely legalistic or legal, the understanding of human dignity. And when we hear dignity in general, we think of more like honor, or like something that makes us worthy of having good things, like a man with dignity, or a person with a dignitary, someone of higher rank and value. And that is the origin of the word itself, of course, the dignitas from Latin. However, in ethics, it evolved into description of something that makes us all human. And this also kind of spills into law as well. So people, the lawyers, think that because it's very hard to argue, very difficult to argue why humans are exceptional, why humans are what makes us so special. They think that in law, this problem also comes with the human dignity. However, if we analyze it purely functionalistic way to understand why a concept such as human dignity exists in the law, in the legal discussions, right? We come to, at least what I find is that we come to the very clear conclusions that it is there to serve a certain purpose of having a human being as an subject of law, as an agent. And this is particularly important, of course, to the Western understanding of the law, like in the political liberalist context, where agency is relevant in exercising of democracy or rule of law or human rights. So these three principles, and of course, so maybe to summarize, and I don't know, because I have the incentive or impulse to just go in
No worries.
more and more and more and more and more. So I won't stop.
I'm digesting the information. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just one little story that I want to tell about human dignity is how it ended up in the legal documents, and I think it might shed light on how it became the in a functionalist way very important concept in law.
Yeah.
So when we were talking about state in general, and Hobbes' Leviathan, and the why state exists in the first place, and where people two parties agree on certain rules and make the absolute power or an authority who is going to decide on wrong and right, and etc. So history showed, especially by the atrocities of the World War II, that giving that absolute power to the state may end up in a very inhumane consequences, like the atrocities of what the Nazi government or the Stalinist government in Soviet Union and Nazi Germany committed against humanity. And it was a agreement in people of Europe as well as in the West that there were certain acts that were so much into violation of what humans think of being normal in the society, that this triangle of power of having the full authority as a state, this should stop somewhere. There should be some line that the power of the state cannot cross. And that's when the discussion about the universality of human rights started. Oh, no, sorry, it didn't start, of course, but when it became very actual and where it started to take shape. And there was something needed in a very pragmatic way, like a concept, something that would actually make this transition possible. So you would say that, yes, you have all the power, a state, but you cannot torture people. And to explain this balance of how can state have all the power but still be limited by something, the human dignity was introduced. The concept that would say that you have power as a state only because the real power comes from a human being, individual, who gives it to you. So you can never take it away from the human being who you serve. So that the circular, like a power coming from a human being, was eventually that's kind of caught into this domain of human dignity. So
I think that's very interesting, and I think it's immediately like a lot clearer, because what I was like kind of wondering is, like, we have these other concepts also, like, for instance, non-discrimination, or we have like rights, the right to privacy, for instance, and stuff like that, and I was just wondering, like, okay, so where does then human dignity kind of come in? But if I understand it correctly, like, human dignity is like an overarching principle from which these other rights would be derived. That's what you're trying to explain, right?
Yeah. So let's start. Like let me tell you this story. When I started researching as a student, first I got interested into AI. I was a student of law and digital technologies, and I got interested into AI and I started reading about it, and I saw all these discussions about privacy, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Privacy is actually like it's important. I personally really value privacy, so I was like, okay, this is I think. But then I started thinking like, okay, why? Why is privacy important? Why is a violation of privacy something that we don't accept? And I started to think of, I really started, it became my obsession to understand why do we think that privacy of individual is important in a society? And why is non-discrimination important in the society? So, and this why, ultimate why in law, in human rights, is human dignity. That's at least what I found. And let's think about this together, right? So if we say that, or let, if we don't say that human individual, human being as a being is important, then you can take away his privacy, right? So it's the valuing of human, or putting a value into a human being, and or making it important for the law is the basis of everything in human rights, in privacy, for example. So you say the privacy is important because it makes a human being into what it is. It's one of those given things that makes human being, the quality of life of a human being, worth having. So, and in terms of non-discrimination and privacy, these are very close concepts to human dignity. And why? And now we have to go to from law to philosophy or ethics to understand why, because yeah, we have to borrow those things, right? So when we say why are human beings important, there are so many different ways to conceptualize this, right? Like it's very natural for us humans to think in terms of, we are like, it's already taken that human life is important, and that's completely fine. Probably every species does that. It's very kind of survival thing. But to justify and argue, there are several reasons that we say it. For example, the ability to create civilizations, or ability to create or plan the future, or autonomy, or the I don't know, bigger brains, or amount of neurons in the brain, or really these are all the, we can go on the reasons to say why are we different, and how does that difference makes us entitled to dominate the earth, because eventually because we claim things, right? We say we are unique, we are valuable, so we can carve out this land and have nobody else come in this land. So if a horse enters this land, it's mine, or we create these rules, so and there, one of the most common, so what was reflected in the legal concept of human dignity in many of these ways of conceptualization is the concept of autonomy, is the concept of self-governance of a human being. This, just imagine, if you don't have this agency, this the autonomy principle, that is the what makes humans elevated from other species, is what enables democracy. I mean, we believe people choosing their governments because we think that they are agents. They can create the state that they want, so they're allowed to, or they're enabled to go on elections and vote to choose and how they are governed. That's the idea of rule of law, that they have agency to, there is law, but they have the agency to comply with the law or don't comply with the law. It's the choice. This is the basis. And then here comes if we, to just show how is autonomy and human dignity in very legalistic terms. So saying that every human being has autonomy. Let's say this statement. This is also very arguable, but just for the sake of the argument, every human being has autonomy. This means two things. Every other beings don't have autonomy. Therefore, every being that has autonomy is equal in the group. So there comes the non-discrimination principle, and there comes your privacy. Because you have autonomy, and because of exercising of your autonomy, you need privacy. If you're not left alone, if you're constantly exposed to the influences and you don't have the space where you can think and reflect and determine yourself, then you don't have the autonomy that makes you a human being in the first place. And then if you don't regard all beings who have autonomy as equal, then there is no autonomy, because autonomy means of regarding all or similar beings equally. So there comes the non-discrimination principle.
I was also wondering, how have you seen, obviously, like if we look at the concept of autonomy, you were talking about autonomy, but this whole topic of human dignity more broadly, new technologies obviously challenge, I think, our understanding of what is so valuable about us as humans, because I can imagine that, we put ourselves as humans at the center of society. But if we look at these robot technologies, at some point, they have their own ability, or AI technologies, they have their own ability to kind of think, and they create new things, and that kind of goes on. So I can imagine that we're kind of shifting from like, oh, humans are extremely valuable, to, oh, these technologies are extremely valuable. How would that shift like our understanding of human dignity towards more something like, technology dignity, or
Yeah.
something like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's also a very, very interesting question. To be honest, so far I intentionally avoid going into that direction, because that is completely, that is another branch of dignity discussion completely, where who can and who should have that dignity that we're discussing, right? In my research, I try to keep myself scoped so that I don't, because it's beautiful, it's really, it's
Yeah, I can
speculative,
imagine.
and very beautiful to go in there, but it's just but just to say a couple of things. First of all, the machine's thinking, like, this is very so much debated thing to even
Yeah,
use the word like that, right? Like, because machines think, machines do their own thing, we do the thinking. How they relate to each other, it's a bit different. The intelligence that we ascribe to them is a bit different to our intelligence.
2 hours.
What is
Yeah.
intelligence is extremely difficult to define, and things like that. So I think, so dignity, let's take dignity as a rank, right? So saying that humans have the higher rank, or something, we can ascribe a certain rank, or certain status to technology, but eventually, for current law, in current legal systems, technology is still means to an end. That is, end is still the human being. And how do we change this? This is more like, should normative discussion for the future, and depending on where we go with the technology. I mean, it's highly speculative. I don't know the answer to this, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I can imagine. But I can also imagine that, the whole technology situation, and these developments that we're seeing, even though you're totally right, we can't say that, machines as such think as we as humans do. But I can
Mm.
imagine that it has influenced our idea of what human dignity means
Yeah.
at the moment. And it also challenges very much,
Yeah.
human dignity. And I was wondering, can you maybe talk a little bit more about how we see that happening, both beneficially and like in a negative way? So I can imagine that, new technologies, I mean, the idea was to focus specifically on artificial intelligence, because that's obviously your focus, but we can take it more broadly, whatever you wish to do. How do we see these technologies impact upon human dignity, both in a positive or a negative
Yeah.
way?
Well, yeah. Let's start it like this. So technology is basically the developments that we're in right now, which is extremely rapid, and there are great things happening, and things are changing at a very fast pace. And we, especially in academia, I think we went into, a lot of people went into this overthinking mode, basically, that, like, okay, what is the human being? What is a human being? Like, what's happening? We needed to be busy, because there was a need to define things. There was a need to define intelligence. There was a need to define thinking. There is a need to define values, priorities, principles. So there's just chaos of concepts and ideas, and people are, and academia and the policymakers, they're thinking, okay, how do we write the laws of the future? What is important in society? What do we care for? What we don't care anymore? Did we change? Did we not change? What makes us human? All these things are because technologies have started to have capabilities that we couldn't imagine before. They deeply impact us. So if we stay in that narrative, in that frame, the way I described human dignity, of us having autonomy, and just for the sake of some sort of clarity that we can have in the discussion, let's just remain in that frame, and then we can observe how it's challenged or helped by the technology, right?
Yep.
I'll start with help, because I think it's sometimes it's important to remember that technology is there for humans. So a lot of the technology that we create, or many of the technology that we create, has intention to increase the quality of life of human beings. And we see this very well in robot technology. For example, as you know, our article with Edward Fosco de la Ronga, we just looked at how the robots can enhance the quality of life of humans with disabilities. You know, the exoskeletons, for example, helping people who cannot walk to run, and helping people who who cannot see to walk, and so these are all healthcare robots in particular that we see a lot of potential to increase the quality of life of a human being, and that is eventually what human dignity is. So the potential of autonomy, potential to create the life that you want for yourself, potential of that is, if we say that is human dignity, then you want human beings able to want things and have those things manifest, right? So anything that you create to help them for that's basically helping them, the human. That's what exacerbate, or that's what helping for human dignity would mean. Now, on the other hand, of course, technology also has a lot of potential for harm. And I'll give you an example from my own personal research, where in general, my research focuses on human dignity and AI in very general terms, but my interest became very, I started to scope it into my tiniest details, or if it's tiny, and I focus on behavioral advertising. I research in what cases does this become manipulation, and then what does manipulation mean in the context of human dignity. And I focus on it because I think what I find is that largely, we philosopher thinkers in general like to overthink things. I also noticed this in myself, right? We sit down and think sometimes when it's not necessary. It just create problem. And I see this in the field happening sometimes, that looking back in 10 years, what the problems were raised and the new questions raised and the new problems raised, it was just overthinking and sometimes making a problem bigger. But if you go back and see where all this AI ethics discussion and large group of the discussions started, was immense success of Google and Facebook, these two companies, and the way they became from nearly bankrupt to world dominant companies, right? And very basis of what these companies earn money from, 99% of 90% of the income of Facebook, and now 88% of the income of Google, is behavioral advertising. It's not just online advertising, but using data to manufacture profiles, automatically manufacture profiles, and use that and sell that to other parties. That is the revenue that the Google and Facebook have. So I started to look at, okay, so if this is where the problem started from, or at least that's how I saw it. Let me, and if we actually see that there are many the scholars who highlight that actually most violating thing in terms of one of the most harmful things that currently happen in the digital technologies is that behavioral advertising that subconsciously influences human beings and basically makes us in the screen, and the persuades us to act in a certain way. Then why don't we look at that? I mean, the companies they became the world's largest companies. They earn money out of this, and we say that this practice is one of the most harmful ones, and then we regulate 200 different things, and we stop talking about this one. So I thought, okay, let me look at this, and that's why I focus on it. And now, in terms of behavioral advertising, And it's a very complex this business model and scheme of technology that goes together, business model and technology. But eventually, what we see is that more and more complex the technology becomes, sophisticated technology becomes, and more attention we give to social media and search engines and etc. online. Uh, we see humans acting or responding to these influences, right? Like, and there are several examples of this. Cambridge Analytica is one of them, but not just Cambridge Analytica. Study after study shows, and that like starting from Fitbits to Facebook to Google, that targeted advertising influence people to buy things that they wouldn't otherwise buy, to vote for things they otherwise wouldn't vote, or don't go to elections where they would otherwise go to. So we see a real actionable results in terms of our real life outside of the digital environment that are influenced by this digital technology. So I started to look at, okay, is this manipulation or is this acceptable forms of persuasion? And if it is manipulation, as a lot of scholars say, then how does this go with the law? Because we were talking about autonomy, that it's basis of human dignity, it's basis of why why we consider human beings important, why we justify existence of law, how we make democracy to function, how we make rule of law to function, the agency, right? The fact that I go to the election and I vote for someone is because the legal system, law, recognizes a human being as an agent who is capable of doing something like that. So if we accept something like manipulation in society, then how does that go with that concept of agency, of autonomy, of dignity?
I remember you saying at the beginning of the episode that the idea of putting human dignity into the law, using it as a legal concept, like the idea was also to kind of rein in the power of governments, right? And to make sure that they couldn't just manipulate humans and do whatever they wanted without limitations. But like when we look at these new technologies, where obviously we have the government, and then we have like another party, which also the government also, by the way, but also private parties that are in the middle.
I think you just touched upon my favorite point, and I think this is the discussion about this, right? Like everything that we talked about had to come to this point because this is the issue here. But one thing that I would challenge that you said is that these third parties that we call technology companies or whatever, big tech, let's say, or yeah, technology, let's just call them. You said they come in the middle. Uh, what I see, or I mean, I guess it depends on the perspective or how you frame it, but it's so to me it seems like that the human being is on the very bottom tip of the triangle, and now we have two things on the power the on the top, right? So you have the government that was initial tip of the power, but now you have the technology company. So there's like a dual exertion of power onto the individual, because technology companies, they're influencing their power nowadays into the restructuring of society and how it works and how it operates. It increased tremendously, right? So and this is, of course, there are many different opinions about this, and I don't want to, as a lawyer, I try to avoid speculation. But let's say their power has increased, right, dramatically, and but what, as a lawyer, is from the perspective of human rights, what I can argue or what I can bring into the discussion is that. So we talked about the state power and the atrocities of World War II, and how the reason why it went why the invention of human dignity or inclusion of human dignity as a philosophical concept came into the legalistic understanding, and but it was not manipulation per se. It was coercion. It was this totalitarian understanding. It was this totalitarian pressure. Or if you torture, if you terrorize people, you can break them. You can torture them. You can, through pain and through coercion and through deception and through. So it was more. It was very physical. It was not. People knew when they were subjected to terror. People knew, they experienced it to the most horrible ways. And but conceptually it comes to this idea of autonomy, right? You don't torture people because they're agents, they're human beings. In the same way, you go, and this is where we come to Shoshana Zuboff and her book on surveillance capitalism, where she introduces the concept of instrumentarian power. So we had totalitarian power, then totalitarianism, or total pressure that we have, and the second one would be instrumentarian, where there is no pressure, there is no pain, there is nobody coercing you or anything. There is just you have no idea that you are being influenced. So this is what we call instrumentarian power, or power of the big tech, when people start to behave in society in a way that is not in their best interest. They abandon valuable things such as autonomy and agency and privacy for the sake for certain individuals to get rich. And there is no oversight, there is no understanding of this happening, and therefore there is no control, there is no revolution, there is no uproar, because you cannot get angry when you don't know that you are being then there is no sense of righteous indignation, that there is nobody harming you. At least you don't see that.
I would agree with that. I would agree, but I would also say that, I mean, we increasingly see like these horrific stories coming to the forefront where, you know, this manipulation, which initially is meant not necessarily in the, like, the same way as we said, like, you know, torture, for instance, which is a direct attack to an individual. But we do see like really horrific and fatal consequences, like, you know, young people committing suicide as a result of certain influences that social media have on them. Or, you know, the influences that, and I mean, it always, for some reason, kind of ends in like social media topics, but you know, genocides in other, you know, other parts of the world, that it has had an influence on that. So we still see like these huge consequences. And I feel like we're increasingly kind of starting to understand that what the impact is, you know, in a financial way, but also like in a more, on a deeper level, kind of interfering with us as human beings and the agency that we have, and just the you know, the value of life more generally.
Definitely, I agree with that. I just what I agree with is that the consequences of what we see in the long term is horrible. I mean, just to imagine people acting out certain things because of the highest bidder, electing certain officials that eventually harm, they go against their personal desires of what the state should look like, and ending up in a state which is like surreal a bit. And these are real consequences. This has happened, right? Like in recent years, and of course these are real life consequences. But what is difficult is that you don't see it on a real time basis. You don't experience it. You have to observe. You know, it's something that you observe as a society. It's something that as you bring up something like what we do right now is we discuss it, we talk about it, and this is to bring it to awareness. And even then, in individual cases, it's very difficult. That's why it is crucial for policymakers to act on it, to understand the issue, and to act on it, to see that if the political liberalism has to survive, if this is the world that we want to continue to live in and grow, which is political liberalist system where we have democracy and rule of law and human rights, then we need certain actions. Then we need to create the rules, what is and what is not allowed in the digital sphere. And I don't like banning things. I don't like. I personally believe that political liberalism is also flawed a bit, and you can bring in a lot of things from, you know, like for example Taoist or Buddhist philosophers and philosophy, and not overdo things and not overdo a lot. But currently we have the political liberalist system. Currently we have a quality of life in West that is good and that we want to see increased, and that is one of the reasons for that is that concepts that we have of autonomy, of dignity, of privacy, of non-discrimination, and we have to know that these are the things that are being challenged in the online sphere. We cannot close eyes on that, and then we decide if we want to keep the political liberalism or just abandon it to the technocracy of money, I guess.
Kind of following up on what you just said, because it will really become a question of like, how do we kind of govern this environment? And I remember reading in one of your papers that right now this whole concept of human dignity is very much like discussed of, you know, what do we expect from policymakers? Like, there is no consensus on what policymakers should do with this concept of human dignity and how we should govern the landscape of new technologies. What is, I guess, what are the different approaches right now, and what would your ideal way forward be in governing this environment?
Yeah, well, this is what I'm currently thinking and contemplating on, because I find it very, I find policymakers also to be in a very difficult situation. Imagine billions of pages of law, and we all want consistency and we all want order. We want the principles to match the rules, and we want the rules to match the principles. And it's just, and then we also want the things to, protect our rights and to be practical and enforceable. And we want a million different things. So it's, policymakers have a real challenge, especially when it comes to philosophizing, when it comes to moral principles and values, and put it in accordance to that. However, on the other hand, we are in a perfect stage, especially in the European Union, where, because of the digital technologies and because of these pressures, we are basically changing, we're rewriting the whole law. Whatever has been written, it's been rewritten for digital technologies. Like if you look at AI Act, if you look at DSA, DMA, GDPR, there's the digital rights coming out, like everything. All the thoughts that have been in the 60 years of European Union law, now it has been into the context of the digital technology. So it is a great chance to have it synchronized, to go back, to go back to ECHR and readapt it, to go back to use these insights that we gained from what is valuable in society, where we're going, what is the future vision of political liberalism, what is the future vision of European Union, and to kind of synchronize the more, or the very basis and foundations of the union. In this case, let's talk about European Union, because that's where we are. But yeah, it's very challenging at this moment, because of the vision documents are being brought out, the strategies such as AI strategies, and etc. etc. It's a perfect moment to conceptualize dignity, or at least say that this is what is important. Human being is being valued, and this is what is European Union is actually doing. If you go in every single new document, it's human-centered approach. It's human dignity in the center. It's these values, the European Union values, that are being highlighted. European Union is going to a more principle-based approach, saying that, okay, these are why we exist in the first place. This is what we protect in the first place, right? And if this is what we protect, we need these rules. And it starts to make sense. It's going to be a big of a challenge. It's going to probably be a mess, because there is lobbying going on, which comes in with millions of euros to influence the policymakers to divert from their initial plans. But again, we see we see actual results.
Well, maybe then to kind of head to the wrap up of this episode, because we obviously started. You just said it's going to be very challenging to create these policies that are policies that we as a European Union, because that's what we were focusing on, all agree on, and B, that are enforceable, and C, that are not so much influenced by third parties that they make no sense anymore. That they're just policies that are in place but have no effect further. That's kind of relates to the enforceability also in a way. But at the same time, we were speaking about, the benefits of these technologies at the start of the episode, or halfway. And then kind of counterbalancing them against the negative aspects. Looking towards the future, how would you say that we kind of have to ultimately balance the positive aspects in terms of human dignity versus the negative aspects, but to ensure that we don't end up in a situation where, there are no technology, there's no innovation anymore. Nothing happens because nobody dares to do anything.
Yeah, well, you see, this is if you look at the documents of the European Union past several years, GDPR, things like that, you will see that this dual goal is present everywhere, right? Every document starts this way. So we want to reap the benefits of technology while maintaining the protection of the human rights. This is the basis of every. It starts the first sentence of everything, and we understand this is exactly what we want. We want balance of creation that is for people, right? We want to create. We don't want to stop and stagnate. Well, yeah. This is an actual problem, right? I'm just thinking. I'm currently reading the book from the Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the Anti-Fragile. I don't know if you heard of it, and it just gave me a lot of food for thought, because I see that, like, tinkering, innovation by tinkering, like trying different things, and doing things, that's how we have evolved. That's how we created things, really. So to mess with that is a problem, right? We don't want that. We want people free to create and try, and make mistakes, and sometimes blow up small things, to then help bigger things. So everybody says, and I have to agree, that clear rules are perfect for this. So if you start to understand what is and what is not allowed, and you make it clear enough so that you set the frame in which you can tinker, then the innovation happens. How to do this? That's exactly right. Like, how to do this? How to do this? You need to work. You need to properly work, and you need to also do a trial and error with the legislation, right? It's also it's a process. I always I recently, not just recently, but a couple of years now, I think as soon as I started my research, I started to see the truth in, personally, into more like Taoistic Zen ideology of, like, not fixing whatever is not broken, not too much action, like just take inspired action only when it's necessary. Don't just overact, overdo, and just overregulate. The regulation is not always the answer. So maybe finding the balance is, also we need to learn in as we learn in our individual lives, as we have to kind of expand it into the regulatory perspective, because the dilemma of when to regulate, how to regulate exactly. These are the decision making of certain individuals and the policymakers, and they they have to be in that state of the right timing of the action. And I, at this moment, if it comes to when we were talking about to a very specific thing, like, for example, online manipulation, it feels that that we are coming to the right point of taking action on it. And Yeah, it takes time, and you need to have the economy growing, right? You don't want to crash it. You don't want to. So
Yeah, exactly. It's super
yeah.
complex topic, honestly, and I think, like, with every topic that's at the intersection of law and tech, and even ethics at the center also, like, I think it's a never ending conversation until the day that either we as humans aren't here or the technology is gone. So until then.
Yeah, listen, that ethics is the part of, like, what we call moral agency, the idea to think and govern yourself accordingly, to make decisions of what's right and wrong. That's what makes us human, at least according to the Kantian autonomy, right? So that's why we talk about this. That's why we discuss things and influence each other's understanding on this. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. No, but thank you very much. I think that is a great way to end the episode, also on a somewhat positive note, I guess, despite the many challenges caused. Thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you when I'm back to Leiden.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Law of Tech podcast. If you want to make sure you keep up to date with the show and never miss out on an episode, be sure to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and follow the Law of Tech on social media. If you enjoyed the show, please give it a rating or review, as it helps others discover the show. And don't forget to share it with your network. For now, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Law of Tech podcast.